Thanks, Elaine and Lucy. Very difficult and new material for many of us, so we really appreciate the insight. And I know right after lunch, Lucy and Elena will be back with us to get us oriented to the business case that we're going to ask everyone to build in the afternoon. And we're going to be talking about elevator speeches and so on. So anyway, really interesting that Elena's presentation, Elena and Lucy talked about that this is not an antiseptic process. We are talking about stakeholders and a political process here. So it's great that you've introduced that. And really the question is, what is it going to take to invest in continuing professional development? So I'll be talking about the second major concept for this workshop, which is HighValue CPD. And I think, as you mentioned, getting us started, Holly, that Paul and our presentations are linked. I'm going to really focus on kind of the historical and conceptual part of this, is how we got here, why are we sitting in this room. Paul's going to then drill down to the value proposition and really get us thinking about what is the value proposition for HighValue CPD. So my purpose really is to provide an outline for HighValue CPD that you're going to help us animate and fill out over the next day and a half. And at the end of my presentation, we've asked you to, your group is going to get started and get the juices rolling and identify a HighValue CPD activity. So that's where we're going with the next piece of this. So I wanted to contextualize where CPD fits in the lifelong professional development of health professionals. So I'm going to talk in broad strokes. We understand that there is a continuum, but of course CPD is by far the longest phase of that continuum in any health professional's life. So it goes something like this, where we have some general education with an emphasis on basic content for the specialization. Really important piece of this is the selection process into our pre-licensure programs. We have highly regulated, highly built up pre-specialized programs, and all health professions then have some type of certification of competence, step 1, et cetera, step 2 in medicine. The next phase then is the really important work of induction into practice, where health professionals really become independent practitioners of their field. And of course, in some of our health professions, we have formal residency programs. We have invested an incredible amount of financial and intellectual and human and regulatory effort into these first two phases. We've built up a magnificent system of health professions education. Even we have discussions of selecting the right people into these programs who will be lifelong learners. We have programs set up in our pre-licensure curricula to prepare people to become lifelong learners. We recognize that the third phase is so critically important in preparing the workforce. And then we send out our health professionals for 30 to 40 years, pretty much on your own. It's a lot less regulated. There's a lot less investment. We talk mainly about seat time to count. So it's a very different effort as opposed to our first two phases of the continuum. And I think what we're here today to talk about is how do we make that third part of the continuum co-equal, and given its importance in preparing the workforce. We have made an enormous progress since the 1970s, I would say, in CPD. You're going to hear some fantastic examples here over the next day and a half of what's already going on. We spent a lot of time thinking about practice-based learning. We have a very solid evidence base for what works in continuing ed and continuing professional development. There's been 39 systematic reviews in health professions education since 1977. So we are in pretty good shape. We're at a launching point. And I know when Patricia asked would I be involved in this? And I thought this is really the next question that's absolutely critically important for us. So, you know, every human activity has a history, and this workshop is no different. So I want to just get us all to get us on the same page. The most relevant and proximate parts of our history are these reports from the IOM and now the Global Forum, clearly focus on you know, building a safer health system in '99, focusing on quality in 2001, the critically important report on health professions education, the bridge to quality in 2003. What Holly mentioned, this report that is absolutely critical that I'm going to be talking about, the redesigning continuing education. Someone mentioned the Lancet report in 2010, and then your great work envisioning following up on that in 2016. And finally, the framework for educating health professions to address determinants of health, and your report then also put lifelong learning at the center of how we're going to address this problem. So I would say these were all aspirational reports, and what we're here today and tomorrow to talk about is, you know, how do we enact these and how do we explore the business case? So this is many of you probably seen this report. Holly mentioned it in 2010. I just want to run through some of what the key concepts were so we're all on the same pages. They identified the problem as CE is the process by which health professionals keep up to date, and this up to date notion is still very alive and well in our system of continuing professional development. This system, the IOM group felt, was deeply flawed. It cannot really properly support our workforce, and it had really become structured around health professional participation instead of performance improvement. So they made a couple of major moves in that report. The first was to change our language to recognize the variety of ways that health professionals learn. Holly mentioned these concepts they wanted to recognize. We didn't need to develop this. We need to recognize what's already going on, holistic view of learning that really stretches from places like this to the point of care, and that is inclusive of all the modalities that we think of as continuing education. This is not throwing the bathwater out, you know. So this is not new. We all know this. If we're health professionals, we understand how we learn. This concept has been embraced globally, which you know, I'll talk a little bit about in a minute. So if we go back to what the IOM report said in 2010, if performance improvement should be the focus as opposed to seat time and participation, then what is the vision? So the report in 2010 took up the 5 goals that were laid out for preparing health professionals. It was laid out in 2003 in the Bridge to Quality report, that effective CPD should ensure that health professionals can provide patient-centered care, work in unprofessional teams, employ evidence-based practice, collaborate with QI systems, and use health informatics. That is the system, which then puts us into a seamless system of lifelong professional development, as these goals were identified for the first 2 phases. To enable these goals, the group discussed the concept of CPD. It's learner-driven, not teacher-driven. These are all adult learners, after all. Uses the broad variety of learning methods. Importantly, it's aligned with systems of care and includes content that is not just clinical, which is important as that is, but also communication and business. As I mentioned, CPD is embraced globally. The International Pharmaceutical Federation issued this report in 2014 that reported on progress since the 2002 adoption of their definition of CPD, which was that, and you'll recognize some similarities here to the IOM that focuses on the individual pharmacist as the locus of responsibility, the maintenance, development, and broadening of knowledge, skills, and attitudes to ensure continuing competence. This is not just about updating. This is about ensuring continuing competence. It's about making sure that our health professionals are prepared to be effective. So this concept is beginning to be embedded in our regulatory systems of accreditation, as well as certification and relicensure. You'll hear a little bit about that tomorrow morning with our panel. Graham McMahon is the CEO of ACCME, and in an article just last month in Academic Medicine, has redirected our attention and talked about why this broadened view is so important. And as he said, CME has evolved to become a multidisciplinary approach for engaging clinicians where they live and work and learn, everywhere that learning is occurring. And he says it's about creating teams, putting a mentor at the clinician's elbow, giving clinicians feedback at the bedside or the clinic, employing simulation and other technology to support learning, and building longitudinal relationships. We've recognized this by building in point-of-care learning into our re-credentialing system. So I think, we're moving there. Okay, so that's up to now. Now we're going to turn this over to you all here and transition from 2010 and talk about the move from CPD to high-value CPD. So I'd like to propose, you've heard a lot of this language already, thank you, Elena, about the importance of stakeholders. So we would like to propose that, first of all, high-value CPD, as CPD, is a learning activity. And all the activities through which health professionals learn needs to be our focus. As IOM did for us, linking this to outcomes, it's enabling outcomes. It's outcome-driven, it's intentionally outcome-driven, and not just any outcomes, but those, as Elena reminded us in the business case, that are important to stakeholders. Because these stakeholders are in social and organizational contexts, and so this is our move for this workshop to go from CPD to high-value CPD. How are we going to understand how to make this investment and make the case? And I know Paul will be talking about this. So what are some of these outcomes? IOM gave us a window into that. None of this will be a real surprise to you, but I think it's interesting that they addressed this issue of the business case back in 2010. And they said the business case for CPD, as all of us in this room know, is really largely unexplored. They said this in 2010. Its value will be improving quality and safety. The value proposition can be derived from its profit generation, for academic centers, societies, industry, and the public. And the value of CPD to the patient paying for the care and to the health practitioner must be considered as well as the system as a whole. So those were their initial insights. They never got past that. They said, okay, we need to really think about this broader view of continuing professional development, and it's up to us over the next day and a half to really animate that. Now, these are being put on the table for your consideration. You're going to be talking a lot about this over the day and a half. But when this committee met, they met on December 11th, 2008. So I think all of us can agree that a lot has happened in healthcare and society since that date. So I think just to put this on the table also, these are really important concepts. They're newly articulated or maybe amplified from what the IOM talked about in 2010, the triple aim being improving population health, enhancing patient experience, and reducing per capita cost. And then recently added the fourth part of the quadruple aim of improving work life of health, care providers, which is clearly an outcome that we need to be considering in the business case. I think Elena mentioned that. So we've been talking a lot over the last hour, so we would like the discussion to begin at your tables, but before doing that, I just wanted to open up and see if anybody had any comments or questions before you start identifying in your tables high-value CPD activity. Okay, you ready to go? Yeah, Susan, yeah.
Yeah, just a quick comment that in addition to improving quality and safety, I would add improving effectiveness. And I think that reflects a lot of the work that we've been doing in this forum. I mean, something like the social determinants takes you outside of your initial education and training and experience and says, to be effective, here are things we now know that need to happen.
Right. Thank you, Susan. That's Susan, if everyone heard that, the question of effectiveness being certainly part of the outcomes here. And again, that's what we want to do, is we put some things on the table from 6 or 7 years ago, and we're counting on everyone here to really build this out. Yeah.
I want to focus on the quadruple aim and what is potentially a fundamental conflict between the breadth of attaining population health and just focusing on the health professionals. Some of the biggest gains to population health have actually been in things like sanitation and outside of the domain. And if you think about the social determinants of health, this is a rather restricted view that doesn't actually potentially optimize the contribution of all of the stakeholders.
Yeah, so we hope you have a really robust conversation about that. That's why you're here. You know, you're right. I mean, certainly there are a lot of public health measures that contribute directly to population health. So think about in your groups, what does CPD mean for you? Who is learning, and what do they need to learn to make a difference? So that's why we're here, is to really I'm not here to answer that. I'm here to set the stage for you all to bring your experience and your insights into helping not just us in this room, but going forward, a lot of people will be, we hope to influence a lot of people as we think about this. And remember, who's going to invest in this? And that's what we want to be focused on. Yes, I saw another question. Lucy?
I just have a question that may be more fodder for the table discussions. But since we are talking about global CPD, what about cultural competence and issues related to different ethnic, sort of cultural issues? And I think that's something we need to take into consideration.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think what Elena pointed us to is who's the investing entity? Who is going to make the investment, and what's going to make the case? And clearly cultural competence certainly as content for CPD is quite relevant. Okay. And so I would, I think put that on the table, and let's see where we go with that. That's critical.
Yeah, just to clarify though, I think language becomes really important here in how we describe things. I know we've done a lot of work with the Native American population, and they won't talk about genetics, but they will talk, or genomics, but they will talk about inherited health. And so understanding the perspective that people are coming from and the language and how you're targeting the CPD, I think is crucial.
Absolutely, and certainly if it's going to be effective, absolutely, yeah. Malcolm?
Just along those same themes, I mean, it seems to me that we need to think much more broadly about people who impact the business case. We've talked a lot in this forum about interprofessional.
Right.
But in reality, if you take the last couple of comments together, it is on, but as I said yesterday, I've never found a microphone that I like. And we need to think beyond health professionals and interprofessional CPD. And I know there's a lot of information, some of which will come out during this conference, about joint accreditation and issues of interprofessionality, if that's a word. in thinking about this. But it's really much broader than that. It's intersectorial, if that's a word. So thinking of all the stakeholders who really impact on the business case, it's really far, far beyond the health professions as classically defined.
Agreed, Malcolm. Thanks for the reminder that we're being asked, as you think about the business case, there's a lot of stakeholders. Sometimes they're at the table, sometimes they're not, but they have representatives at the table. So I think that's why we're proposing the definition of outcomes that are important to stakeholders, and we need to know, first of all, who are the stakeholders and what are their interests and how will this benefit and what will be the cost. So I think broadening that out is essential. Okay, are you ready to engage? So the way it's going to go is we'd like you to, this 2 parts, we'd like you to first of all identify at your table an example of a high-value CPD activity. This is really just to get us started and getting into the conversation. There's a lot to explore here, as you heard from these questions. We're not going to take a report back because the purpose of this really is to set you up for the next, after Paul's presentation, to talk about costs and benefits of that CPD activity. So you have a facilitator from our planning committee, I think, at every table. There are some folks here who are peripheral or not at a table. We would love it if you could form a group or groups of your own and also have a report back. These will be quick report backs when we get to Paul, but right now we need you to form a group, if you're not in one, and identify an example of high-value CPD. So if we're ready to go with that, we can turn you loose. 10 minutes. So at 10 o'clock, Paul's going to come up here and get us started.